Have you ever wondered how a single number can supposedly tell us if an entire country's economy is doing great or if it's in trouble? Well, today we're going to crack the code on index numbers. These are the hidden figures that measure pretty much everything from inflation to economic growth. Let's dive right in.
I mean, it sounds impossible, right? How can you possibly take millions and millions of transactions, everything from you buying a coffee to a company building a massive new factory, and boil it all down to one single number that actually tells us something useful?
Well, the source material we're looking at has a really great analogy for this. Think of an index number like a barometer, but instead of predicting rain, it's measuring the economic climate. It gives us a quick, simple reading. Are things looking sunny, or is a storm brewing on the horizon?
And, don't let that simple idea fool you. This tool is unbelievably powerful. It's exactly how we know if inflation is creeping up, if our cost of living is rising, and, whether the whole economy is actually expanding or starting to shrink.
Okay, so what is an index number really? At its heart, it's a special kind of average that's all about one thing: measuring change over time. Basically, it compares what's happening in the current year to a base year to see just how much things have shifted.
Right. Sounds straightforward enough, and there's always a but, isn't there? This is where things get a little tricky, because it turns out that how you measure that change isn't as simple as it sounds. The method you choose can actually change the answer. And that creates a really big problem.
Which, brings up a really good question. If all we're doing is measuring change from point A to point B, why on earth are there so many different ways to calculate it? And, more importantly, why does it seem like every single method has its own kind of built-in bias?
To get to the bottom of this, we need to look at the two main approaches. Think of it like a tale of two methods, the Laspeyres method and the Paasche method. And when they go head-to-head, you'll see the dilemma they create.
This slide really gets to the heart of the whole issue. So on one side, you have the Laspeyres method. It basically uses an old shopping basket to measure today's prices. But think about it, when prices go up, people usually buy less of that expensive stuff. Because this method doesn't account for that change in behavior, it almost always overestimates inflation. Then on the other side, you have the Paasche method. It uses today's shopping basket, so it's more current, but it tends to do the exact opposite. It underestimates the real rise in our cost of living.
So you see the problem, right? We're stuck in this statistical tug-of-war. One calculation gives us a number that's probably too high. The other gives us a number that's probably too low. How in the world do you find the truth that's hiding somewhere in the middle?
And this is where a hero enters the scene. An economist named Irving Fisher looked at this exact problem and came up with this just elegant solution. It's a method so clever and so balanced that it's often called the ideal method.
The source material puts it in a way I just love. If Laspeyres and Paasche are like two people in a heated argument, each yelling their own version of the truth, Fisher is the peacemaker who steps in to find a fair, balanced compromise that everyone can agree on.
And the solution is just, it's beautiful in its simplicity. You don't have to pick a side. First, you calculate the Laspeyres number, the one that's too high. Then you calculate the Paasche number, the one that's too low. And then you find what's called the geometric mean of the two. It's a special way of averaging that naturally gives you a balanced number that sits perfectly in between them.
So why the fancy name? Why ideal? Well, it's not just marketing, I promise. It earns that title because it passes these really important statistical tests for consistency that the others just don't. For example, it passes the time reversal test, which basically means if you measure from 2020 to 2024, you get the perfect inverse of measuring from 2024 to 2020. The math just works, forwards and backwards, which is why it's so trusted. Okay, so that's the theory. We have this ideal way of measuring change. But how does all of this affect you in the real world? Let's bring it home with something we all hear about, the Consumer Price Index, or as it's better known, the CPI.
Oh yeah, the CPI. You hear about it on the news constantly, right? Inflation is up, the cost of living is down. Well, this is what they're talking about. It works by tracking the prices of a standard basket of goods and services, everything from groceries and gas to rent and healthcare that a typical family buys.
But here's the thing, to get a real, accurate picture, you can't just treat everything equally. Some items in that basket are way more important to a family's budget than others, and to account for that, economists use something called weights.
And this quote from the source material just nails it. It makes perfect sense, right? A 10% jump in the price of something you buy all the time, like food or rent, has a much, much bigger impact on your life than a 10% jump in the price of a fancy watch you might never buy. Weights make sure the index reflects that simple reality.
So here's a look at what a typical basket might contain. And wow, look at that slice for housing. It's huge. That means a 10% spike in rent is going to move the entire CPI number way more than even a 20% jump in one of those smaller categories. It's all about proportion.
And that's what makes this so incredibly personal. The CPI, it measures an average basket. But let's be honest, who's really average? Nobody. Your personal spending habits, the things you prioritize, they create your own unique economic fingerprint. It's why inflation can feel so different from person to person. So the question I want to leave you with is this. If you looked at your own spending, what would your economic fingerprint say about you?